Welcome to the latest webinar from Hired Power. You are tuning into an amazing webinar today titled Celebrating a Life of Recovery with Kevin Chappy Chapman and Harold Owens. This is in honor of Sober October, and we are trying to take an inside look at long-term sobriety. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our amazing speakers. First of all, we have Kevin, which if you don't recognize him, you probably just haven't seen enough movies lately because he's been in so many. He's been in Person of Interest, Brotherhood, Boondock Saints, and one of my favorites, Mystic River. He has definitely made his mark in the film and television world. And what most people might not know is that while cultivating his successful career, he was also beginning the road to sobriety. And today he credits much of his success over his 20 years of sobriety, stating, "I wouldn't be where I am today if I still drank." So he's going to give us a little bit of an inside look at his story, which I'm very excited to hear about. And then we also have Harold Owens here, who is one of our amazing new clinical liaisons at Hired Power. We're very lucky to have Harold. He is, for the past 32 years, he has specialized in the field of addiction treatment for the entertainment, legal, and medical communities. In 1999, he was hired by MusiCares Foundation as the senior director, where he was responsible for implementing all aspects of the addiction recovery program. Harold has twice received official certificates of commendation from the mayor for outstanding service to Los Angeles in the field of addiction recovery, and he now lectures and speaks around the country helping people with sobriety. So without further ado, Kevin and Harold, the floor is yours.
Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Harold here, and my good friend, Kevin Chapman. When we decided to do the series and I was asked, I was thinking, I have a lot of great friends in the entertainment industry, but Kevin, you are someone that I very much admire. We met about 10 years ago, maybe 15, at a good friend of ours, great actor that was kind of struggling. And that's how I came to know you. And because you've always been of service to this community, you have a group of friends that over the years we have seen time after time them crash and burn, and it's guys like you that come to service and are there and available when somebody reaches out. Hey, I got a friend here that needs some help. He's crashing and burning on a set, or can you help this guy? You're one of those go-to guys, Kev, and I really do appreciate what you've done over the years. So again, that's why I really wanted to have you on. I don't see you enough. So
this is true.
I don't see you enough, but for the audience out there, I just want to say this. Kevin Knight is one of the cultural heroes, I would say. And I do mean that, in the Boston area. Everybody knows him, everybody loves him. Whenever I see anybody from Boston and I ask them, hey, my buddy Chappy, and they go, oh yeah, love Chappy, blah blah blah. You are so well loved in your community. So I'm really happy that we can take time to talk about how you got there, Kev. How you got from whatever, how that first day of you contemplating sobriety, the arc of your career, and how I'm so proud of you every time I see your name or I see you in a picture. I'm so proud that you are up there and are doing it, man. So I want to just ask you, what was that defining moment for you? What when you decided to to stop drinking and using, putting a plug on the jug? Was there a particular moment or situation that prompted you to get clean? Chap, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Harold. Thank you for those kind words. And you are one of those people that hear me.
Yeah,
I hear you.
Unfortunately, you're kind of freezing up, but go ahead.
Okay. All right. So just to thank you for those kind words. Whenever our paths cross. just so that the audience is aware, I live outside of Boston presently, about 15 miles outside the city. We got hit with a devastating, I guess, hurricane that took down over 250 trees and a number of power lines in my community. I am talking to you right now from my my basement, using electricity off a generator that is outside. And all intended purposes, I should have rescheduled this conversation. But for me, this conversation is too important to reschedule. When I have conversations like this, it's always in hopes of showing somebody or leading somebody to another lifestyle, a lifestyle that I found over 30 years ago, and has changed the course of my life. I mean, I could live 1,000 lifetimes and never repay what I've been given. So forgive me if the internet does freeze at any period of time of this conversation. We're doing the best we can. And once again, as I say, was too important of a conversation to postpone.
You're looking good on my end, Kev.
Okay, myself, I grew up in Boston. As a direct result of alcoholism is how I ended up here. My not to bore you with details, but my mother was from Biddeford, Maine. My dad was from Hammond, Louisiana. Louisiana is a great state. My father lived in the woods of Louisiana, the section of Louisiana where they think a Coke machine is magic. I mean, it's like way in the woods. And my mother met this man, had never had a boyfriend before in her life. She kissed this man. He was shipping off to Korea during the Korean War, asked my mother to marry him. She married him, knew nothing really about him or his family, gets pregnant on a honeymoon. My father comes back from combat, brings my wife, his wife and his new daughter, which is my sister Gail, back to Louisiana. And my mother realized she just married into basically a family of hillbillies. She went on to have 3 more kids with this alcoholic lunatic. And in the middle of the night, took us 4 kids and an old Rambler. And we left Louisiana on our way back to Biddeford, Maine. We were driving through Boston, and my mother saw on the Boston Record-American that they were hiring nurses. My mother was a nurse at this time, and they were hiring nurses at the Boston City Hospital. And us kids waited in the car while she went in and got the job, and then found an apartment online. And that's how we ended up being raised in Boston. It was a direct result of alcoholism. And the reason I tell you that, and I tell you this story is that as a kid, my entire life, I was looking for someone to pat me on the head. I was looking to be loved. I had a sister who was pregnant at 15 and a half years old. I had a brother who had his first child at 18. I had another sister who was out of the house at 23. So, and my poor mother, she was constantly working. We lived in the Mission Hill projects. We went from that apartment. It wasn't even an apartment. It was an attic apartment with a galley kitchen in the back. We slept on sleeping bags on the floor, and we lived there until we got into the Mission Hill projects. So my entire life, as I say, I was constantly looking for someone to love me and to validate me. And it was at a time when busing was going on in the city of Boston. And so there was a lot of racial hostility going on in the streets. And I was a kid who grew up in predominantly Black neighborhoods my entire life. So there was not a lot of education going on in school either. There were days that I would go to school with a knot in my stomach so bad because I didn't know what was going to happen throughout the course of that day. And because the violence that was going on in the schools, teachers getting beat up, it was just complete chaos. But my mother had no one to watch me. So I had to get on that bus and go to school because she had to go to work. So and the reason I tell you that is just to kind of set up, to kind of set up the backstory of this young kid who was just constantly looking for someone to love him and looking for something to fill that hole in his soul. You know, I was a guy that was always quick with a wit and always hung around with the older guys. So I was always accepted, but I was always the court jester. I was always the one who was, you know, doing the outrageous things and, entertaining the older fellows because I didn't want to get kicked out of the group, you know? And so, you know, that kind of sets the table of my childhood, you know? So I went on this way for quite some time, up until I was 28 years old, and I had 3 friends that had joined a 12-step group, and I'll never forget. I was sitting in the Bayside Club in South Boston, Massachusetts, at the bar, and I was spiritually and emotionally just bankrupt. I had nothing to give, and I remember like it was yesterday. And I put my beer on the bar, and I just said, "I'm done."
Yeah.
And everyone looked at me and they said, "What?" And I just said, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm done." And that's what began my journey of recovery.
Kev, sounds familiar. I so relate to that. And I wanted to ask you, those group of guys that were going to meetings, did they become your, it sounds like father figure was, you didn't have that guy there for you as a kid.
No.
With many of us that come into 12-step recovery, it's great to have some men who are mature enough and know enough about life and living sober to take you under their wings and really, we're kids when we come into these programs and getting into recovery. So that's amazing. You mentioned, I read somewhere that you're a comedian. I didn't know that. Did you start off how did you get into acting and your career in the entertainment industry?
Well,
was it before you got sober?
Really say, I don't know where that comedian thing came up, but years ago, I used to work in Nick Comedy Stop, which was a comedy club I was working there at night, and why don't you get on stage? And so I had maybe 12 minutes of material. Guys would take me on the road, and I would be the opening act, or I would be the MC, or but I never really had the passion to trip friends who were very successful comedians. And then as time went on, I was probably about 3 years into recovery, and I had a friend who opened a sober club outside of Boston in Quincy. And so I was working at Nick's Comedy Stop, and all these comics like, Dave Attell and Vicky, all these, great comics would come in from New York, Jay Moore. They didn't have a place to stay, so they could stay with me for the weekend, but they had to come to the sober club and perform for me on Wednesday night. And that was for young men and women who were just putting their life together, that felt that their life was over because they no longer had a substance to put into their body. So we did these comedy shows on Wednesday night. We had, I had Jay Moore, Bill Burr, Dane Cook, Bobby Kelly. I mean, I had, the funniest Lenny Clark, these great comedians would come there every Wednesday night and put on these phenomenal comedy shows for these men and women who were just starting their journey of recovery. So that's where I think the comedy thing began.
And so let me ask you, I got to go back to Mystic River because I just watched it again, Kevin. It's one of the greatest ensemble casts and compelling stories that just captured Boston and, kind of the setting that you grew up in. And how did it come that you got cast for that correct me if I'm wrong, that very important film in your career? How did you get cast for that? Kev, you're frozen up.
Well, a year and a half. Okay. I was in Los Angeles about a year and a half prior to being cast in that film. And I was working at the House of Blues on Sunset at night, and I was studying acting during the day. And I read in the Boston Herald from Los Angeles that Clint Eastwood was making a movie in Boston. And so I had representation at the time, and I went to them and I said, I need to get a meeting for this film. And my representation told me that they had already seen everyone that they were going to see in Los Angeles, that they had moved on to New York. So I said to my rep, you get me a meeting in New York. And I jumped on a plane from LA at my own expense, flew to New York, read the book Mystic River on the flight. And when I got there, Phyllis Huffman said, do you know anything about this story? And I proceed to go through the entire book, so I knew it very well. And that's how she picked up the phone right there and called Clint Eastwood and said, you got to meet this guy.
Oh.
So that's how I got the job.
That's a great story. Were you sober at the time, newly sober?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I was sober when I moved to Los Angeles. So I got sober in 91. I got sober in 91, like 93.
Yeah.
I had met a guy at a 12-step meeting that I was attending, and he asked me if I was interested in this gentleman who was running for mayor, the greatest mayors in the history of Boston. So I went to work on this guy's campaign, and so when he got elected, he made me the liaison to Dorchester, which is a community in which I grew up. So I did that probably for about 7 years prior to an acting career. And the way the acting thing came about is I was working in a logistical capacity on behalf of the administration. And I was working with Dennis Leary and a director by the name of Ted Demme, who was the nephew of Jonathan Demme. He was a great, great guy. And they kept looking at me kind of funny. And they said, can you act? And I said, I think I'm
Your bandwidth is very low.
So they gave me a script and I read it with them. They said, okay, tell us who this character Mickey. And they looked at it. So I went and played the character, and that was the first movie I ever got. It was a movie called Monument Ave.
Right.
So from that, I was like, maybe I can do this. So then I started taking lessons and getting small parts in big films, and small part in Cider House Rules, small part in The Bedroom, small part in Boondock Saints. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for this. So I left my job and I moved to Los Angeles.
So, Kev, I used to work in one of my many hats. I spent a lot of time with a few actors that we have know in common on sets. And, it's there's a lot of boring, idle time for actors, especially if they're struggling. So can you kind of describe what a day looks like? If you're on the set, do you find that there are more and more people in recovery that you guys, can you do meetings on the set, or what's been going on in the last 20 years or so? Have you seen an increase in that community getting together when they're working? And
yeah, I mean, I have. I've seen it. I've seen it at its best, and I've seen it at its worst. I recall working one time on a project with a guy who was obviously under the influence, but of course, his conduct was his conduct was I guess his conduct was tolerated because they needed to get the shot,
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with him, this individual after, and it was, this individual confided to me that he had been struggling,
Yeah.
and we continued to talk throughout that entire process. I would pop my head into his trailer, or we would just get a glimpse of each other on set and just kind of make that eye contact. To let him know that he wasn't on this journey alone. I feel, for me, that's the best medicine, is letting someone know that they're not alone. And that's what I always try to do. I mean, I'm very forthcoming with my road to sobriety. I'll make little jokes when you'll be out to a dinner or something. Someone will say, hey, do you want a beer? And I say, no, thanks. I break out in handcuffs, which usually gets a laugh, you know what I mean? And it just sets the table right there. It's like, okay, we don't need to discuss that any further, but that's the biggest thing is like just letting people know they're not alone.
And so, Kevin, on the set, what are the stressors for you as an actor? What are the stressors that an actor faces? If anybody's out there thinking about a career in the entertainment industry, but what are some of the stressors? Can you talk a little bit about, I know about the boredom, but are there any other in that chosen career?
Well, any type of art is subjective. So there's no right way or wrong way to play a scene because it's all subjective. So I think if you allow yourself to go down that rabbit hole, you can. But what I try to do is I try to build a defense mechanism before I even get there. I try to meditate. I try to, prayer is part of my morning ritual, and I try to implement some prayer as well. And I just try to stay present. I try to keep my head where my feet are. I don't project, and I don't look what happened yesterday. I just try to deal with the situation that's in front of me to the best of my ability and move forward. I think there's a lot of pressure on people today, especially with social media. I think social media really, I find that I have two young kids. Well, not young. My daughter's a sophomore in college now, and my son is a junior in high school. But those are conversations that I find have with my kids a lot. People saying something on social media, or people, I find my kids sometimes going down the rabbit hole with that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a slippery slope in its own right. But I think that if there's that old saying, fail to prepare to fail, you have to prepare. It's just that simple.
And how about the balancing act between working and your family? I've talked about this a lot. If you're gone for a few months, how do you manage that? How do you manage being a good dad? I must say to the viewers out there that, Kevin has an amazing family life that he highly values. And we've talked about this for a long time, but how do you manage that, Kev?
I try to keep that in my recovery. If we're on a bookshelf,
yeah,
my recovery's on the top shelf. On the next shelf is my family. Then the shelf below that is my career. And that's kind of the order I keep it in. If I can keep my recovery first, then I can have a great family life. And if I have my recovery and my family life is going well, then my professional life is going to excel. And I talk to my kids. I have, there's a lot of people out there that struggle. There's a lot of kids today, and it breaks my heart with this, opiate epidemic that we have going on throughout the country. And you see a lot of people. I'm sure you, Harold, in your profession, run into it a lot.
It's frightening, Kevin.
And you see these kids. Oh, it's beyond frightening. It's beyond frightening. We have an area here in Boston known as Methadone Mile. There's an area in the city known as Methadone Mile. How sad is that?
Yeah.
But you know what? And there are more kids down there. It breaks my heart when I go through there, when I see someone I know or someone I know's child, sleeping in one of those tents down in Methadone Mile. It tears the heart right out of your chest.
Well, not only that, I mean, that coupled with the fentanyl plague, a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago, I got a call from Kevin. I happened to be on a board of an organization called Comedy Gives Back. We started it to help struggling communities during the pandemic, but later we decided that mental health and addiction was one of the areas that we wanted to help with, and we provide service to comedians. And ironically, I get a call from Kevin, who didn't even know I was on this board, about a friend of his that we were able to manage to get him in to a really great facility and pay for his treatment. And again, it just says, man, I know you're beaming with that because of what you did with this guy, Kevin.
He is on fire.
I know you told me that.
On fire. He's back on the stage. He's crushing it. It's like, this is a guy I've known for 30 years.
Yeah.
And he is just like, it blows my mind.
What I'm amazed with sometimes, Kevin, is how
he's a completely different person.
Yes. Yeah. What amazes me is that how our past can play such an important role in us helping the people that we grew up with or hung around with, or even like you talk about growing up in Boston and how bad it was. But the fact that you lived that life prepared you to do that role for Mystic River. The fact that you worked in a comedy club prepared you for this great actor, comedian, to call you and have enough, he felt safe with you, Kev. And I am amazed when that happens to me. And there's no describing. That's one of the feelings of sobriety, I think, that when we are helping people, as people have helped us, and I don't mean this to sound egotistical, but it really, watching that process happen in someone is so wonderful because we went through it. We experienced that joy, and the event is so life-changing and it means so much. I know my worst experiences that I've had in life as a kid or growing up have been, I get to dwell on, I get to bring that to the table. I'm working with a kid today. I got a call this morning. Just yesterday, Kevin, I got a call from this kid who I've been working with for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks, trying to get him to go into treatment. He was just there yesterday, like yesterday afternoon. I had everything marked out. I had the number for him to call to do the intake. And then this morning, I wake up to a call from the mom. He was involved in an accident, passenger, a DUI, and his girlfriend was injured and went to the hospital in this accident. I have such fear about what's going on with the drugs out there, and they don't know what they're taking. So
I have a friend. I have a friend who just lost a son. It was in the press, so I'm not talking out of school here.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hayes, who played for the Boston Bruins, played in the NHL.
Yeah.
I knew Jimmy, and I know his dad and his mom, and he just the greatest guy in the world. Just had a second child. Out for a couple of beers. Somebody pulls out a package. Let's do it. Let's sniff a little cocaine.
And it wasn't.
It's fentanyl.
It's fentanyl. Yeah.
And they buried him.
Yes.
And he's got two kids. He just had a second child 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, something like that. Now there's two kids that will never get to see their dad over one bad decision, over a couple of beers. And, somebody said, hey, I got a package. Let's do a line,
Yeah.
And next thing you know, he's not here anymore. It's just, it's devastating.
Yeah.
It's absolutely devastating.
Hey, Kev, I want to change subject just a little.
You just got.
Say that again. I didn't hear it. Hey, Kev, you're froze.
I said, I'm froze now.
Not now.
I'm sorry, man.
That's okay.
Blame it on Mother Nature. It's not my fault.
I know. There's nothing we can do about that. I was going to ask you, I wanted to a little bit change subject in the same vein. I find part of my recovery is in doing, work outside of my job and outside of, the 12-step program I'm involved in, but giving back to the community. And I wanted to ask you, we talked a little bit about you working with the Boys and Girls Club in Boston, and what brought you to that? How did you get involved in that? And what other things are you involved in the area? What do you do?
I mean, there's a number of things there's a number of things that, let's put it this way. I say yes more times than I say no. So to sit here and, and rattle off a bunch of organizations and pat myself on the back is not my style. The Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester, I've been on their board of directors now for over 20 years. And I do whatever is asked of me from that organization within my power. Mark Wahlberg is also a member of the board. Mark was one of the kids from the club, actually. And his youth foundation is very supportive of the club, and they do some amazing things. And I just got back from Detroit about 3 weeks ago, playing in a charity golf event that Mark hosted out in Detroit. If people ask me to do something and it's gonna help someone else's quality of life, and I'm 9 out of 10 times I'm in.
Yes.
I as I say, I could live 1,000 lifetimes and never repay recovery what it's given me.
I know.
I heard someone say.
Go ahead.
I heard someone say a long time ago, this is the way out of no way out.
Yes. That's
right.
It's the truth. And the funny part is when people may have seen you for the first time in a movie, or they see this big guy and badass, right? That they don't know that on the other side of this badass is this absolute lovable teddy bear.
Yeah,
it's doing so much, and that's the great part. And it's your career, it's acting, but it's art replicating life in a way that's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can we talk a bit about your family and your decision to move? You could have been living in LA. I don't know how that decision came about. I'm sure it was to protect your family, because LA is such a crazy place to live and bring up kids. What was your decision that prompted you to get your family and back east?
Well, I mean, acting is not who I am, it's what I do.
Yes.
So it's never defined me as a person. My children and my wife, we're just not those people. We don't I don't care about being in the limelight. I like to go in, do my work, and go home, and that's what I like to do. And I just want, there's no disrespect to anyone in Los Angeles. There's a lot of great kids that are raised there, good people like yourself, Harold, that are raised in LA. But I just didn't want my kids. I wanted something different for my family.
Yes.
I didn't want my kids going to school talking about, my dad's working on this movie, what's your dad working on? Or, did your dad's show get picked up? Or, I just didn't want that. Nor did my wife want that. So we had an opportunity. I did a show for Showtime called Brotherhood that shot in Providence, Rhode Island. It was fairly successful. It ran 3 seasons. And after we finished that show, my wife looked at me and she said, what do you think about staying on the East Coast? So that's what we did. I was fortunate enough to get hired for, Detective Fusco on Person of Interest, which ran for 5 seasons. So, that
how lucky are you, my friend?
I was just blessed. I mean, I've been blessed my whole life, Harold. Since I put down the booze and the drugs, I've been blessed my entire life. I've swung from one tree to another, and never knew how I got there. But I just said thank you and tried to, do the best of my ability.
Sure. It's a great career. And your family, your wife.
I did City on the Hill for Showtime. My wife is from I met my wife she's from Connecticut. She went to graduate school at Boston College, and I met her, while I was working in the capacity for the mayor of Boston. And she moved when I moved out to LA. She moved out right. We've been together a long time. It'll be 23 years this year.
How many children do you have?
2. I got a sophomore at Ohio State and a junior at Boston College High School.
So, hey, let me ask you, being a sober dad, and having the dad that you had, I mean, how has that impacted your relationship with your kids and what you have seen growing up to your parenting style? How you navigate?
Well, I have conversations. I have real conversations with my kids. I have, my son is an athlete. He plays lacrosse, and he's pretty good at it. So we spend a lot of time in the car going to like Maryland or Pennsylvania or Florida, various states. And but there's something to be said. There's something to be said for a conversation with your child, shoulder to shoulder, as opposed to face. I learned more things about my kids in those rides than I could. It's just a great way to communicate. To be in the car, shoulder to shoulder, having a conversation. It's non-confrontational.
I remember the best conversation I had with my father was, he hadn't done this in a long time. I was maybe 15 or 16, and we took a trip down to San Diego to visit some relatives, and we hadn't done that in so long, but it is the best time ever that I can remember having with my dad for many years, and so I definitely understand the value of that, taking those long trips and just spending a time alone with your children. It's the best.
Right.
The best.
And and it's funny because I don't participate in alcohol and drugs, and my kids are very well aware of that. I find my kids don't really drink. My son, he's a well-adjusted kid, great athlete, great student. He'll go to a party and he'll be home at 10 o'clock. And I don't even have to ask him. I know what happened. The beers came out and he's like, I'm out of here, and it's not to my doing. It's not, it's not from any suggestion for me. It's just the power of example, and my kids, we talk very openly about it. And that's the most important thing you can do with a child today is to have a conversation, not talk at them, talk with them.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, growing up in LA, I've worked with a lot of children of very famous entertainers. They have a hard task. They have it very hard, and they act out at a very early age. So congrats on that, and what you're doing.
I'll tell you a funny story. So when I was in Los Angeles, I was spending some time with a bunch of guys, and we were participating in this recovery chat. And one of the guys there was just coming around. He was trying to kick an opiate addiction. And I would spend time with him, and I'd take him out for pizza, and I would just. One day he said to me, and then this went on for probably 3 or 4 months, and I only knew this kid by his first name, and so one day this kid said to me, he goes, hey, he goes, I know that I owe you for those meals that you've been buying me, and this type of stuff. And I said, you don't owe me anything, man. I said, just keep doing what you're doing. I said, that's how you can repay me, Well,
oh yeah.
And I asked the kid what his last name was. And he told me, okay. And I'm not going to reveal his last name.
Right.
But his father was one of the biggest internet applications that you probably have on your computer right now.
very well.
Yeah, and I do as well.
Yeah.
And when he told me that,
My young
I was
buddy.
like, and I, blew my mind.
Yes. Great kid, by the way. And
Phenomenal
you're
kid.
absolutely right.
Phenomenal kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me ask you one. I know we're gonna maybe turn over for some questions, hopefully. But how did you do, Kev, during this pandemic, man? I kind of, I had to get my feet back on the ground when it first started, when everything shut down out here, and I really did have to circle the wagon. And so it was been very much traumatizing in a way. I don't think the fullest extent of this has yet to be seen yet, but we've seen, a friend of mine, a multi-billion, one of the richest men in America, one day jumped off the roof of his Century City apartment. I don't know if you knew him, but he was nobody knew he had mental health issues. No, and he was a great guy, just always there to help folks, but you never know what's going inside. And if you don't have this, that's the thing about recovery. We have this great community of people around us that we can, keep close to us. How did you manage this pandemic and being shut in? And
how did I manage? I started a 12-step meeting in my yard. I have a 12-step meeting in my yard every Saturday at 5:00, and all is welcome. And I have 2 big fire pits that when it gets colder, I just make the fire big.
Wow.
And that's how we got through it. I mean, it was trial and error. I bought a carport, a plastic carport. We tried that for a while. We had, it started with one fireplace, and then it grew to 2, and then it grew to 2 fireplaces and a couple of heaters. And, we just compromised,
So many people started new meetings when we couldn't go to the outside ones.
Think of all the things you did, all the crazy things that I can't speak for you, but I can speak for myself. All the crazy things that I did to get high. So I chased sobriety with that same conviction.
Yes.
And, and that's it. I mean, I think of all the crazy scenarios I put myself in, all the places where, looking back on it now, like, I should have never walked out of that building. I should have been shot. I should have, and you don't even think about that because you're chasing that thing. So I tried to flip the script on that and chase recovery the same way.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I think let's try and see if there are any questions. Lisa, can I turn it over to you or Emily to maybe field some questions for us?
Absolutely. All right, everyone. So this is the good time to start popping in any questions that you might have for Kevin or Harold, and we can try and get to them as quickly as possible. For now, we have a couple here already. So let me see. Harold, can you tell us a little bit about your career?
My career? Well, I was very fortunate. 33 years ago, I got sober, and I didn't know what I was going to do. It's kind of like Kevin. I had done a lot of things in the past, but it didn't add up to what I would say a career. When I got sober, clean slate, I started over. I went back to school. I eventually I worked in a treatment center in LA called Exodus, and we had a lot of entertainers and musicians, in particular, actors. And I started working with that population and eventually became program director, worked there maybe 10, 12 years, and then Music Cares, a job at the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. We do the Grammys, came open, I applied, and since 1999, I've been there, and have worked with the music community for that many years. And, I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And I got these amazing, amazing opportunities that I am eternally grateful for. And I've seen people I've worked with. I've seen bands that I've worked with many years ago in the 90s earn Grammys, and some of the biggest acts in the world. And I remember I would do family style interventions with them. And out of that, I have seen label presidents, people that were managers who, they got sober and later became presidents of major labels. And they have referred me clients all through the year. So I've been very, very lucky about the work I've done. I will just say that.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Okay, a few more. So how do you motivate someone who is resistant to treatment and sobriety to get them to actually go to treatment?
You want to take that one, Kevin, and I can chime in?
Yeah, I mean, in conversations like that, I always try to bring love to the conversation. And I think if you bring love to the conversation, you never go wrong. You're never going to get someone to participate in recovery if it's something that they don't want to do. It's just that's just my experience. I remember I have an older brother who could use some recovery, and I got him into a treatment facility and got him in there on a scholarship through a friend, and drove him all the way up there, and got him a carton of cigarettes and gave him a hug and told him I loved him, and he beat me home. It's like it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But that's my experience, Harold.
Yeah,
this is
and
more your
someone
forte.
said, Linda, I just got a note here that she leaves the door open, and I can't agree with you more. Whoever sent that comment, I rely a lot of my personal story. I rely on my personal journey in my struggles to initiate, and all they have to do is listen. If one thing connects, they will understand that I've had that unique experience of being an addict or an alcoholic. They will understand that. And there's something in their brain, I think, that resonates with that story. And if I can initiate a conversation, I think I'm halfway there. We leave the door open. Yes. We try our best to let them know the wonderful experiences that they're going to have. And, a part of me has always been, when I was using and drinking, it was I would say like a near-death experience. It was a slow decline into death. And really, you don't have to go that far, I tell people. You don't, because the end result of this deal is madness or jail or death, period. There's no in-betweens for people who suffer from this disease.
Mm-hmm. No, it's definitely a nasty bit of business. And that's why, that's why this conversation, as I say, any other topic I would have rescheduled with the current situation that's going on right now in my community with the power outage and all that. But these conversations for me are an important piece of business. This thing deals in death. I mean, I have more people in the ground than I have above the ground.
Oh, Kevin, if we started digging up the graveyard, my friend,
make it.
If we started digging up the graveyard with our friends that you and I have known,
right,
people would say, no, that's impossible. Impossible.
Right. So true. So true.
All right. Here's another great question. What advice would either of you give to someone just starting out on the recovery journey?
Good question. Kevin?
I'll tell you the greatest piece of acting advice I ever received was from Clint Eastwood. And I never forget, I went up to him, I was so excited. I was like, Clint, I go, come on, give me something, give me a nugget, give me something. And he looked at me and he went, listen, and walked away. That's all he said to me. Listen. That's all he said to me. He said, listen, and then walked away from me.
Wow.
And I stood there and I was just like, he's so right. Just listen, just listen, just listen. There are people out there that will take you and coddle you and love you until you learn to love yourself. And they'll carry you. Listen and if you're, and pray to God and try to develop a conscious contact with God.
Yeah.
Now that's my advice.
Yeah, I can't top that. I mean, listen is, it's the greatest Zen word out there. It is. It's what they tell us. Shut up, sit down, and listen.
Right.
Cotton out of the ears.
It's great advice for so many things in life.
Yes.
All right. Here's a couple more great questions. So many people out here consider California sober a success compared to full-blown using and addiction. What's your take on that? I don't know what California sober means.
You know what it means, Cal?
I don't either.
That means people are smoking weed
No.
on the side, I think.
Oh, maybe they're sober except
Yeah.
weed.
And say, but still smoking.
All right,
because
Felipe,
pot is
if
such
you
a
have
big thing right now.
Oh, he said weed and beer only.
Yeah. Well, it's not being
California
sober.
Okay.
I would just say this. I think that you have a couple different models out there that are emerging, the harm reduction model, which I think for some folks are maybe okay. But for me, and I looked at that early on, I wasn't the one who could do that. Did not work for me. I knew that inside of me, that drinking, moderately drinking or even drinking near beer at a game is not okay. I tried it once early in sobriety and I did not work. So I'm not too familiar with that term, but I have heard it used.
There's an old saying, non-alcoholic beers for non-alcoholic people.
Yeah, that's right.
That's so funny. All right. So do you have a daily routine?
I know today, the way I started my day took a little, because I had a really busy day and I started with a little meditation around 6:30, just lying in bed. I'd turn off TV and turn off the news and shut it down. I have a big problem with trying to zone out on current events these days, but I really did take some time out. And I found that once I did that, everything, that uneasiness about the coming day was so much better. I have meetings that I go to during the week that are very important to me. They keep me centered, and I call friends. Chap, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, we've already discussed that in the topic, and the same
Yeah.
thing. I try to start with a little meditation in the morning,
Uh-huh.
a little prayer, maybe a little reading, but the phone is my biggest asset.
Yeah.
99% of the people in my life today are on the same road that I am, and we talk openly and honestly with each other, and that's so important.
Yeah, it's so important
It's
to
funny,
communicate.
When I first started in recovery, I had a real problem with honesty because I grew up on a street corner. The last thing you could do is get on the street corner and tell people you were scared. I'm frightful.
Yeah.
Talk about your feelings. So honesty was a big part for me. Getting, I heard rigorous honesty. I'm like, wow, I don't know if I can do that. Until I met a guy, just try to be a little less dishonest. And that's what I did. Every day I tried to be a little less dishonest. And I've always tried in my, over 30 years of recovery, I've always attempted to bring forth a better representation of Kevin than the guy you met yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty much how I do it.
Amazing. All right. I know a couple of people might have to sign off right now. Someone said, thank you for taking the time to share your experience. I'm going to try
This
and
was
get
great.
2 more questions if we can. So what advice would you give in case of a relapse?
Get back on the saddle. No shame, right? Get back on the saddle. I think the pride, when your pride's involved in a relapse, that's a bad thing, because you don't, like Kevin said, you start lying, you're not honest about, you know, the trouble that you're in, and people wait until it's insurmountable sometimes. And because of that pride, that pride that we have as alcoholics, sometimes we don't want people to see the bad side of us. And so it's hidden. And just like that kid I was working with, you know, yesterday I had this great conversation with him. He was being open and honest with me. But the unpredictability of this disease is that it was too late. I was 6 hours too late. He was 6 hours too late for making that call to the treatment center, and now he's in jail. So
ego, easing God out.
yes,
That's what it stands for. Ego, easing God out.
yeah.
You know, it's you know, it's you know, it's so funny when we first come in here. We don't want anyone to know. We don't want anyone to know that we're having a problem. But the ironic part is, we're usually the last to know.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? When I came in here, everyone knew I had a problem with drugs and alcohol, but me. I was the last person to know. But when I got here, I'm like, oh, don't let them know. Oh, don't let them see me. Oh, you know, and,
Yeah.
and everyone was like, yeah, we knew you had a problem.
Yeah, I kind of minimalized my problem. I knew I had a problem, but not the whole extent of it. No,
Right.
They knew the whole extent of it.
All right, here's someone else that says, you guys were awesome. Two of my favorites, Harold and Chappy. Worked at House of Blues that time also, being from Boston and getting
How cool is
sober.
that, Chap?
Yeah, in
You got
LA
a fan out
21
there.
years ago, and going to my Thursday Beverly Hills home group with Harold.
Hey, who was that, Lee?
Awesome.
Love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, Lee.
Great. Oh, that's the best.
Good stuff. Good
All right,
stuff.
this was so great. Well, I would love to keep asking questions and talking, but I know everyone has to get back to their days. So I really appreciate, Harold, all your expertise. Kevin, Chappy, if I can call you that. I'm so grateful that you tuned in. I know, you know, even with a generator and on your iPad in the basement, we really appreciate you. It's really powerful hearing it from you.
Chappy, I love you.
Thank you.
You are my great, dearest friend, and I really I've loved what you had to say. And again, you know, I do, and I say this, I adore you, and I very much admire the way you walk this walk, you know. And thank you so much, Risa, because I know I'm not the best internet person or computer guy, and you've helped me a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you. And, you know, thank you for your friendship over the years. And more importantly, thank you for all the hours that you give to helping people find recovery. You're a good man. I love you. You're a dear friend. And, you know, you just
back at you.
You're the best, man. I love you.
Back at you, Chap. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Reese.
Shout out to Nanette.
Thank you.